When we made our new McDonald's Spicy Chicken McNuggets, you were praise hands emoji. Then we ran out, and you were screaming tears emoji. Now they're back, so you can be grinning face with sweat emoji. Order ahead on the McDonald's app. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
For a limited time at participating McDonald's.
Average weight loss 15.4 pounds in first 2 months. For guarantee cancel within first 14 days. Discount with 2 months of auto delivery. Food charged and shipped every 4 weeks. Call or see website for details.
Do you want to lose 18 pounds fast and improve your health? Now you can lose up to 18 pounds in your first 2 months with Nutrisystem. Get delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners, even snacks and shakes delivered safely to your door. All delivered for free. It's easy to follow, and you'll see results in your first week. Just text FOOD to 323232. You'll get your favorite foods made healthier and perfectly balanced to put your body in fat-burning mode. Text FOOD to 323232 right now and get 50% off a month of meals and shakes. That's right, 50% off a month of meals and 50% off a month of shakes with probiotics to help support your immune system. Just text FOOD to 323232 right now. There's even a money-back guarantee. Millions of people have lost weight with Nutrisystem, and you can too. Lose up to 18 pounds in your first 2 months. Just text FOOD to 323232. That's FOOD to 323232.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. We're going to talk a little bit more about the plea deal in Florida. Now, we know that the 11th Circuit Court just heard the appeal from Courtney Wild and Paul Cassell to try and have this NPA overturned. Well, an article from the Palm Beach Post is really digging to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is that the Palm Beach County Prosecutor's Office worked in conjunction with the defense of Jeffrey Epstein to make sure that these girls didn't get justice. Now, I've talked about this from almost the very beginning, right? How the Epstein legal team and his conglomerate of powerful lawyers were able to put a significant amount of pressure on the state prosecutors, and they were able to control the narrative and get their client, Jeffrey Epstein, one of the most prolific sex traffickers and child abusers in the history of this country, well, they were able to let him get that nice NPA, catch a nice cushy jail sentence, and the girls that were abused, once again, were just ignored. And this new article today from the Palm Beach Post delves into that. And it talks about how the high-profile lawyers from Jeffrey Epstein's team were able to use their significant amount of influence to push this case in a way that they wanted. And the saddest part is the state prosecutors went along with it. This article was published by the Palm Beach Post. The headline, Jeffrey Epstein Case. PBC state attorney worked with defense to undercut feds, the report says. This article was authored by Jane Musgrave. And that headline alone is enough to make you want to beat your head off of a wall, right? How in the hell does the state attorney's office work with the defense to undercut the feds? And furthermore, how are the feds, led by spineless bitch-ass Acosta, getting run roughshod by a local attorney's office? From the moment federal prosecutors were handed the Jeffrey Epstein case, they didn't trust Palm Beach County State Attorney Barry Krischer. Yeah, I don't blame them, right? You know, Barry Krischer's the guy that tried to throw Rush Limbaugh in jail for a bazillion years over being a drug addict. Now, I don't care what you think about Rush Limbaugh one way or the other, but if you're going to pursue somebody for having a drug addiction as as hard as they pursued Rush Limbaugh, you would think the same prosecutor would be just as worried about someone like Jeffrey Epstein conducting all sorts of crimes against children, right? You would think that it would be the same kind of hard-charging, I'm going to throw you in jail the rest of your life attitude, but we certainly didn't see that from Barry Krischer. In fact, we saw Barry Krischer attempt to get Jeffrey Epstein pretty much off. But even though federal prosecutors believed Krischer had intentionally torpedoed the case, they took the rare and misguided step of putting him in the driver's seat. You see, this is why none of it adds up, right? The feds never defer to local like this in a case like this. But yet they deferred to the local prosecutor and let Jeffrey Epstein face state charges instead. If anyone thinks that that was a decision that was made by Acosta on his own without calling his buddy Mr. Mukasey frantically and frequently, you're not paying attention to how all of this bureaucracy works. Instead of vigorously pursuing the politically connected financier, pedophile, on charges that he sexually assaulted dozens of teens at his Palm Beach mansion, Krischer joined hands with Epstein's defense team and undermined federal prosecutors' efforts. I've talked about the federal prosecutor's office in Palm Beach for a while, and I think that they played a huge role here. Obviously, I think the okay came down from Mukasey's office, but I think that the Palm Beach office here was very significant in the deal that Jeffrey Epstein ended up getting. I think that the state's attorney's office even, I'll take it a step further. I think Krischer and the state's attorney's office went to bat for Jeffrey Epstein. Now, do I have direct evidence of that? No, I don't. I can't provide that evidence for you, unfortunately. But all the pieces fit together. And when we keep getting articles like this after the fact, when we add more context to this story after the fact, things start to emerge, right? Things definitely start to emerge. And it looks, at least to me, that the state's attorney's office was playing ball with Jeffrey Epstein, and I don't see how anyone cannot see that at this point. The conclusions, detailed in a 300-page report of an investigation by the U.S. Justice Department, paint a damning picture of both Krischer's duplicity and federal prosecutors being naive. That, I can't even say that. I don't even think, I won't say that the federal prosecutors are naive, and I won't even say they're negligent. I'll say they're just lost, right? They're easily guided from up high. When they get a call from the Attorney General's office, these dudes aren't willing to risk all of that static, right? They're not willing to risk the chance of never attaining whatever political position they have their eye on. So they play ball. Mukasey's office contacts Acosta's office, and then Acosta's office tells Krischer, hey, look, the ball's in your court. My boss, this is the way we decided to go after this case, and the ball is in your court, Mr. Krischer. That is such a rare occurrence for the federal government to pass off providence like that. The federal government wants that feather in their cap, right? The federal prosecutors want that feather in their cap. They want to take down the big game like Jeffrey Epstein. Why in the hell would they pass it off to Krischer? Unless, of course, there was some sort of bargain worked out behind the scenes. The 22-month-long investigation by the Office of Professional Responsibility cleared former South Florida U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta and his top lieutenants of wrongdoing in connection with their handling of the salacious case that began more than 15 years ago. And I always expected that, right? Cover your ass. The Department of Justice is always going to protect their shitbag employees like Acosta. They're going to do their best to protect them. And that's what you saw in this report, right? Oh, we made some mistakes. There was some bad decision making. but nothing too damning, right? Nothing that's going to get Acosta hemmed up. Nothing that's going to get some bracelets tossed on his bitch ass. You see, because if they did that, then the whole entire operation's in jeopardy, right? Now he's ratting out Mukasey or Philippe or whoever it was that passed these orders down to him. We know that Mukasey's office signed off on the deal, and we know that Mark Philippe signed off on the deal. So if they went after Acosta, right, and tried to hold him responsible in this report, they'd have to go all the way up the top. And the Just Us department certainly isn't setting that precedent, folks. Since Krischer doesn't work for the Justice Department, it offered no opinions about his conduct. Under investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for his actions, he declined to detail his decision-making to investigators or comment for this story. Yeah, well, no shit. Krischer is the last guy that should be opening his mouth at this point. Everybody knows that Krischer dropped the ball. Everybody knows that his office acted like the Three Stooges times 100. Everybody knows that his office let Jeffrey Epstein walk. The report comes 1 year after the Palm Beach Post, in an investigation called The First Failure, detailed how Krischer crippled his own case by working with the defense and treating Epstein's teenage survivors like prostitutes instead of victims of sexual assault. And we see the same strategy popping up again now, right? As they try and go hard to discredit Virginia. And it's the same story this time around, except for one crucial factor. The prosecution isn't sitting behind the scenes with Ghislaine Maxwell's scumbag lawyers and working out some kind of ridiculous deal like the state prosecutors did. That's not going to happen this time around, thankfully. But the first time around, and the strategy of calling them prostitutes and only one of the witnesses speaking before the grand jury, that could have never happened without the state prosecutor's office signing off on it and being on board. So the state prosecutor's office, like I've said for a very long time, should really bear the brunt of all of this. And people like Krischer and even Villafana, who people have tried to lionize as of late, are all responsible for this, in my opinion. At some point, you have to say to yourself, enough is enough. If you're a prosecutor here, or you're involved in the case at the state level, and you know it stinks to high heaven, you got to come out all guns blazing, and you go to the media, whatever it takes. If you lose your job, then so be it. Some things are more important, in my opinion, and it seems like a lot of people, especially in the world of politics, have seemed to have forgotten that. While investigators found no evidence that federal prosecutors violated any professional codes or criminal laws, they said Acosta showed extremely bad judgment by placing his faith in Krischer. Again, do you really think Acosta made that decision on his own? You think Acosta woke up one day and said, look, we're just going to pass this case off. That's it. I'm making that executive call. That is not what happened. Acosta doesn't have the power to make that call. None of these states' attorneys do. None of these attorney generals do. All of that stuff gets kicked up high. Station chiefs, bureau chiefs, all the way up to the directors, all the way up to whoever the man is on the top. That's how these things are handled when we're dealing with somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, or we're dealing with somebody like Ghislaine Maxwell. It's not made, the decisions aren't made by mid-level bureaucrats. Too sensitive, and it's a political hot potato. So, Acosta letting Krischer run the ball here and control the offense was not a decision that was made by Acosta. If Acosta tried to make that decision on his own and his bosses didn't like it, do you really think they wouldn't have shut it down? Of course they would have. Even after the longtime state attorney showed he shouldn't be considered a reliable partner, Acosta continued to let Krischer make key decisions about a controversial federal non-prosecution agreement. And again, it just goes to show you that the federal government is not as interested, shall we say, in going after the so-called elite as they would be going after you. You would be in prison for 1,000,000 years if this was any of you out there. But Jeffrey Epstein? Nah, we'll pass that off to the state's attorneys, three stooges of an office, and we'll let them yuck themselves around the case all day. And we'll just have our hands off, here at the federal prosecutor's office. We'll just kick back and let you prosecute this high-profile case, and we'll just, eat some sandwiches and act like fools. I cannot believe for 1 second that this is a decision that was just made by spineless-ass, bitch-ass Acosta. I am sorry, but I think that is just scratching the surface, and that is nowhere near deep enough for us to get the answers that we need in this specific situation. Acosta blindly handed authority to Krischer to craft the crucial parts of the secret Epstein deal that allowed Epstein to escape a 60-count federal indictment as long as he pleaded guilty to 2 state prosecution charges. Let me read that for you again. 60-count federal indictment turned into 2 state prostitution charges. You really think that Acosta has that power? He just waves a magic wand and all of those felonies go away? 60 federal indictments go away? Zero chance, folks. And I'm sorry that I'm driving that point home so often, but I see so many people so many times turning their ire completely onto Acosta. And as I've said, he deserves it, right? He deserves to be maligned, he deserves to be ridiculed, and he deserves to be hammered in the press. But it shouldn't stop there. Remember what I'm always talking about. The pitchforks and the torches need to focus their rage at the right people. And mid-level bureaucrats, while it might make us feel good if they get toppled, if they lose their jobs, if they get caught up in an embarrassing scene and they're caught, it might make us feel good. But at the end of the day, they'll just be replaced by another mid-level bureaucrat. Until we get to the real problem, until we get to the real meat in this dish, and that's the people that provide all of this money to these politicians, until we focus our ire on them and our rage at them, this is a story that's just going to continue to replay over and over and over again. Because you can take out all the mid-level operatives you want, like Acosta, but the real problem are the people above them. While investigators said the non-prosecution agreement was unjustified and ill-advised from the outset, any hope that it would lead to real punishment for Epstein disappeared when Acosta ceded authority to Krischer. As a 4-term state attorney, Krischer knew the rules of Florida criminal justice system. Federal prosecutors did not. Well, that's a cop-out. I don't even want to hear that shit. This is the federal government we're talking about. They could have had a local attorney, state attorney general, or a state prosecutor on retainer to walk them through the loopholes of the legalese of the state statutes. But they didn't. They let Krischer and his office have the reins. They let Krischer and his office do the damn thing. And what that did was it added another layer of plausible deniability for the F-heads at the top of the CIA and the FBI. Right? That's what they always want. Layer upon layer upon layer. Like any organized crime enterprise. Krischer used his knowledge so loopholes were in the agreement that Epstein, with the help of his high-powered legal team, was able to exploit. Look, Krischer needs to be held accountable, folks. He needs to go to jail. That's my honest opinion of this guy. He was a key cog in what happened here. Without him and his meddling, Epstein would have been in prison for 1,000,000 years. But Krischer, at the behest of the federal prosecutors, put his fingers into the pie, mixed it all up, pulled his fingers out, and we were left with a shit pie. Evidence repeatedly showed that Krischer was predisposed to manipulating the process in Epstein's favor, investigators wrote. This is all damning stuff, right? And while we covered the initial drop of the DOJ investigation, this goes deeper into the state level. And as you all know, I've always thought that at the state level was where the real big problem was here. And I think that Krischer needs to be arrested. And I don't say that lightly, right? In my opinion, Krischer needs to be charged with some sort of negligence in this case or something. There has to be a way for him to be punished and to face some sort of repercussions for his behavior. You can't be in a position like he was in and conduct yourself the way he did and get off scot-free. There's no way in hell that should occur, in my opinion. For instance, because language in the agreement wasn't clear, Epstein was housed at the Palm Beach County Stockade, a minimum security facility that was known for its lax rules, instead of at the county jail as federal prosecutors intended. So again, remember, when we're out there and you see people yipping, yawing, and hawing about Acosta, and they're so adamant that it's just Acosta and it was all his fault and all his... Remember this article that we're reading here and refer back to it if you must. The state prosecutor's office in this case has and always will be the biggest problem here. Even though federal prosecutors insisted he be locked up continuously, Epstein was approved for work release. He was allowed to leave his cell for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to work at his Florida Science Foundation, even after federal prosecutors provided strong evidence that the operation was a sham. So imagine putting yourself in Epstein's shoes, right? Flip it around. You're the scumbag Epstein. You're going to, you get arrested for something. Do you really think you'd get the privilege of being in this stockade, low level, able to leave the jail cell for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, go to work, all of that jazz? Do you think you would have ever been afforded those rights? Especially being charged and convicted of the crimes Epstein was? But yet he gets all of these special privileges afforded to him by Barry Krischer. And then the feds will say, well, we handed it off to Krischer's State Department, state prosecutors. So it's their fault. And then the state prosecutors blame the federal prosecutors, and we have this hodgepodge of bullshit. Get that stupid report that comes out, blah, 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 blah. And the only people that are holding anyone accountable are the local papers in Florida, it would seem. The Palm Beach Post has been great about this. They've been all over this portion of the case from the beginning. And they have been of the same mind as myself when it comes to Barry Krischer and his office. They are big-time villains in this story, in my opinion. What sort of disgusting prosecutor works behind the scenes with a scumbag like Jeffrey Epstein to try and undermine the allegations of these little girls? If that doesn't get you fired up, folks, you better check your pulse. Further, Epstein was able to circumvent what Acosta described as one of the most crucial parts of the agreement. When Acosta agreed not to pursue federal charges, he said he wanted to make sure Epstein was forced to register as a sex offender so he couldn't continue to prey on teenage girls anymore. However, when Krischer charged Epstein with soliciting of a minor for prostitution, he chose a victim who was 16, even though evidence showed at least one of the teens he molested was 14. The survivor's age made a difference, investigators wrote. Of course it did. The older the girl is, the less the charges are going to be, right? Them using the 16-year-old and not the 14-year-old got Jeffrey Epstein the lesser charges. Meanwhile, protected him and threw all of these little girls under the bus. And when I say little girls here, folks, we're not talking about 18 or 19. We're talking about 14, 15, and 16. We're talking about the Palm Beach portion of this sick son of a bitch's disgusting criminal crime spree. 14 years old, and Krischer, this disgusting, smarmy, scumbag son of a bitch, uses the 16-year-old instead to manipulate the ruling by the court. It meant the Palm Beach resident, who also had homes in New York, New Mexico, the Virgin Islands, and Paris, didn't have to register as a sex offender when he visited his sprawling ranch in New Mexico. The age of consent in New Mexico is 16. So, again, right back to New Mexico. All roads lead to Zorro Ranch, don't they? Funny how that place has still never been raided, huh? But that's okay. I'm headed back there in February, I think, or March, one or the other, probably the end of February like I've thought, and I'm going to do some more investigating. I'm going to spend some more time at the Santa Fe Institute. I'm going to drive down to Los Alamos and get an idea of just how far that is from Epstein's ranch, and I have a few other irons in the fire down in New Mexico as we speak. Hopefully, I'll be able to talk to my sources down there again. Hopefully that occurs. Hopefully they'll be available. And I have also been talking to a couple of new sources in New Mexico that certainly have a tale to tell. Epstein bought the ranch in New Mexico with this in mind. He knew the age of consent laws. He could have had a ranch in Nevada or Colorado, or he could have had a ranch anywhere. He chose New Mexico, A, because it's close to the Santa Fe Institute in Los Al, and B, because of these laws. After Epstein was found hanged in a Manhattan jail cell in 2019 while facing multiple charges of child sex trafficking, New York prosecutors said he had exploited teens at his 10,000-acre Zorro Ranch near Santa Fe. So where is the subpoenas? Where are the warrants to kick in the door and wave in your 4-4? Where's any of that in Zorro Ranch? How come that's not occurring? And folks, by the way, if you notice, I haven't even talked about the nonsense that people, the person who said, well, we saw Jeffrey Epstein drive up to our gate. That did not occur, okay? And it makes everybody look like a whack job when you have these people out there making those sorts of allegations. So do better. If you're out there and you're protesting at Zorro Ranch, I totally support that for sure. But don't make up any wild, weird conspiracy theories, okay? Please. We have enough real shit that's mind-blowing in this case. That wild, made-up conspiracy theories aren't needed. Save it for your Reddit can't sleep thread or whatever the hell it is you got going on. Krischer was aware that different states have different rules for sex registration because one of Epstein's attorneys explained it to him in a 2006 letter, investigators said. Unfortunately, they said, Acosta and his team didn't do the same research. Or they did and they ignored it. That's not possible? You really think they didn't do their research, huh? Pretty sure they did their research, but they just ignored it. More significantly, Krischer misled federal prosecutors about what state charge would require Epstein to register as a sex offender. It was Epstein's own legal team that contradicted Krischer's erroneous assertion in time so the correct charge was filed. Imagine that. This guy is such a bumbling idiot, such a buffoon, that the defense had to fix his filing charge to make sure it was the right one. So there was no prosecutors in this case the first time around, folks. Not at all. It was the state of Florida, the federal government, Jeffrey Epstein and his high-profile lawyers against poor girls from broken homes who had nobody standing up as their surrogate, who had nobody standing up for their rights, who had a court system who failed them, a prosecutor who did not care, and unfortunately, a populace who was left in the dark due to the negligence of the legacy media. How in the hell is this non-prosecution agreement still standing? Yet, despite this evidence, which at least suggested that the state authorities should not have been considered to be a reliable partner in enforcing the NPA, Acosta did not alter his decision about proceeding with a process that depended completely on state authorities for its successful execution, investigators wrote. Again, I don't believe it was Acosta. I believe, and this is me being cynical again, right? I believe that the Department of Justice and the federal prosecutors' offices wanted it to look like this, right? They wanted it to look like the state government flubbed the ball if it ever came back to haunt them. They're certainly not going to make it look like they screwed the pooch, right? So Acosta was left holding the bag as the front man for sure. But really, I've said it from the beginning. I truly believe that the state prosecutor's office here needs to be fully eviscerated. They need to be held to account for what they did, folks, and for the way they conducted themselves. There's no prosecutor's office in the whole entire country that should be taking the side of a sex offender over the 14, 15, 16-year-old high school girls that he or she abused. That should never occur. These prosecutors should be the biggest advocates for these girls once a case is brought. They shouldn't be working behind the scenes to undermine them or their case. At first, Krischer was gung-ho. That many believed Krischer had no interest in prosecuting Epstein for luring teens to his home for sex should come as no surprise to Acosta, who stepped down as U.S. Labor Secretary in 2019 after questions were raised about the sweetheart deal he helped negotiate. The case was brought to Acosta's office by Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Ryder, whose agency had uncovered Epstein's lurid scheme during a year-long investigation. And Michael Ryder was one of the only heroes in this whole entire sordid ordeal, in my opinion. Michael Ryder was one of the good guys. He brought this case to light. He went after Krischer's office after they didn't want to send it up top after they were going easy on Epstein. And Chief Ryder was a hard-charging man who really wanted to get to the truth of this. While Krischer was initially gung-ho about pursuing the case, Ryder said, the state attorney's enthusiasm quickly waned. After Epstein's lawyers peppered him with the teens' MySpace pages, which they used to portray the girls as willing participants and worse, Krischer decided their claims weren't credible, Ryder said. Yo, I got news for you. If this was my kid, and this asshole state's attorney prosecutor here tried to use their MySpace page to demean them and undermine their credibility, it would have been on. I would have gotten a contempt of court charge, and I would have had to been escorted out of that court. I would have lost my shit. Furthermore, I would have worked as hard as possible for the rest of my life to make sure that Krischer and company were held responsible. Assistant State Attorney Lana Belholovac told investigators there simply wasn't enough evidence to charge Epstein with unlawful sexual activity with a minor and lewd and lascivious molestation of a minor as police wanted. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit, a mountain load high. We're talking Everest stacked on top of Everest high. There was no evidence, huh? Unbelievable. Instead, she said she offered to let Epstein plead guilty to a charge of aggravated assault. While he wouldn't have to serve any jail time, he wouldn't be allowed to have any unsupervised contact with minors during his 5-year probation. Epstein rejected the offer. Of course he did. Look how easy that would have been. No jail time, and he wouldn't be allowed to hang out with unsupervised minors in his 5 years. Well, that's okay, because don't worry, Glenn and Eva Dubin will let you hang out with their daughter, Uncle Jeffy. What sort of deals were these, right? We went from 60 federal counts to aggravated assault. I mean, how can anyone look at this and not see that this is completely effed? That this has not been completely and utterly manipulated? But now, the house of cards is tumbling down, folks. We used to just had a peek in the window. Now, because of independent content creators and investigative journalists that have worked hard on this case, it's not just a little piece of the curtain that's been pulled back. We've pulled the whole damn curtain back. And everyone's getting a whole big eyeful of the filth on the other side. Later, Krischer convened a grand jury that indicted Epstein on a single charge of solicitation of prostitution. There wasn't any recognition that he paid women as young as 14, girls, as young as 14, to give him massages that led to disrobing, fondling, and sex. We're talking 14 years old, folks. 14-year-old girls coming to his house for massages, fondling, and sex. If you throw out everything that we've discussed after Palm Beach even, him, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the rest of them should be in prison for the rest of their lives. Never mind adding on all of the other crimes that were committed elsewhere, and the financial crimes on top of that. Just what happened in Palm Beach alone makes this guy and his criminal enterprise some of the most disgusting, prolific sex traffickers in history. But by then, Ryder had already gone to the FBI, who had dubbed the investigation Operation Leap Year because police initially identified 29 survivors. I knew that it didn't really matter what the facts were in this case. It was pretty clear to me that Mr. Krischer did not want to prosecute this case, Ryder said in a deposition. For sure. Chief Ryder said that from the jump, and that's why they went over his head and brought the feds in. And even when the feds came in, even though the feds at first were going to charge Epstein with 60 counts, the pressure started to come in hot and heavy from Epstein's attorneys, and they pulled the right levers up top, and my guess is Mukasey and his band of criminals put this all into motion because of the leverage being put on them and the pressure being put on them by Epstein and his high-profile attorneys. During a May 2006 meeting, Palm Beach police detective Joseph Riccari warned that Epstein's attorneys used hard-knuckle tactics, Assistant U.S. Attorney Marie Villafana told investigators. Riccari said pressure had been brought to bear on Krischer by Epstein's attorneys, recalled Villafana, who worked in Acosta's West Palm Beach office and spearheaded the federal investigation. What did I just tell you? Pressure had been brought, right? And right here they say it, by Epstein's attorneys. And not only by Epstein's attorneys, I'm sure they were buoyed by federal prosecutors. And I don't mean Acosta. I'm talking the bigwigs on high, folks. Epstein was represented by Harvard law professor Alan I Kept My Underpants On Dershowitz and nationally known defense attorneys, including Jay Lefkowitz and Gerald Lefcourt of New York and Roy Black of Miami. But once Krischer was involved, Epstein hired West Palm Beach defense attorney Jack Goldberger. You see how that works? Goldberger, a local guy, has an in with Krischer. They're buddies. Favorable deals coming your way. And so the wheel spins and the spokes gleam. According to Ricari, Goldberger was hired to force Assistant State Attorney Delia Weiss, known as an aggressive prosecutor, off the case. Because her husband worked in Goldberger's firm, Weiss had to step aside. Again, the manipulation of the legal system by Epstein's attorneys is right there in your face. They made these moves behind the scenes. They used loopholes to try and get Weiss off, got her bumped, and then pursued the case the way they wanted to pursue it without the interference of Weiss. But investigators said there was likely another reason Goldberger was asked to join the defense team. The longtime defense attorney had a relationship with Krischer. Of course he did. That's how this whole works, don't you know? What, you don't think Christian Everdell, Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer and ex-prosecutor in New York, has a relationship with the prosecutors? I'm sure he does. Epstein's wealth enabled him to hire multiple attorneys who had pre-existing personal connections to some of the government attorneys involved in his case, in the state attorney's office, in the USAO, and elsewhere in the department. They wrote, based on the attorneys Epstein selected to represent him, a reasonable inference can be drawn that Epstein believed that hiring attorneys with relationships to the prosecutors would be beneficial to him. And of course it would be. That's how this all works, right? That's how this works. These guys have these relationships. That's what you're paying for as well. You're not just paying for their legal advice, right, in the courtroom. You're paying for all of their connections as well. Recognizing that she was up against aggressive legal heavyweights, Villafana alerted her top bosses in Miami, including Acosta, that they would be inundated with calls about the case. Villafana said that she had never before asked to meet with executive management about initiating a case, but the allegations that Epstein had improperly influenced the state attorney's office greatly troubled her, investigators wrote. Over time, other top officials in the U.S. Attorney's Office came to share Villafana's view that Krischer had bowed to pressure. Look, again, I'm not going to lionize Villafana, but I won't demonize her either. She was the only one that had any sort of plan here. The only one that was really going hard. The only one that really wanted to send Jeffrey Epstein up the river, it looks like. So I'm not going to demonize her either, but at the same time, if it was me and I was in her position, I would have rolled over, played whistleblower, no matter the cost it would have had to my career. And I think that is a black mark against her, right? In a case like this, and as a prosecutor, your number one goal should be to protect people. And if that doesn't occur because of pressure from on high, then you have to step up and you have to put an end to it, right? You have to be the one to make the step, to take the step, to stop the corruption, to stop the nonsense. And Villafana didn't do that. But what I will say is this. From all of the stuff we have heard, all of the reports we have read and seen, she seems to be the only one in that office that truly tried. So I definitely will give her that. All right, folks, that's the end of part 1 of this article. We're going to pick up part 2 tonight during the daily drop. It'll probably run another half hour or so I didn't want this episode to be too long. So, we're going to end it here, and we will pick back up part 2 of this article tonight at the Daily Drop. So if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. In the description box, you will find all of the links that go with this episode. All right, folks, I'll be back later on tonight for part 2 of this story and the Daily Drop. Hope you all have a fantastic Sunday, and we will pick up where we left off later on.
If you're looking for inspiration, Sure Payroll's Back of the Napkin podcast is the place where entrepreneurs share the stories of their big journeys in small business.
Just search Back of the Napkin on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get podcasts. Join us for Back of the Napkin from Sure Payroll.
On Sure Payroll's Back of the Napkin podcast, entrepreneurs share the stories of their big journeys in small business, like Maria Erna, the owner of Wag Grooming Salon and Spa for pets in New Hampshire.
Why would you hire the best and then go in and tell them how to do their job? It just makes no sense to me. I just provide them the tools they need, the resources they need, and the respect that they deserve.
Just search Back of the Napkin on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, or wherever you get podcasts. Join us for Back of the Napkin from Sure Payroll.